I'm Dan and welcome back to Bart of the Red Hand. Today we're going to go over a spoiler review / breakdown of episode 5 of Amazon's The Wheel of Time, Blood Calls Blood. Let's get into it. So a couple things before I get into this. One, yes, there will be spoilers for potentially the entire book series of The Wheel of Time as well as all 5 episodes of the Amazon series. Additionally, click that like, subscribe, and bell icon so you're notified whenever I come out with new content. All right, so let's get into the first scene, that funeral scene. All right, so we're going to start going through this. For this breakdown, we're going scene by scene. So we're going to start with that first funeral. Here are the things that I thought were interesting, and some of them related to the book, some of them didn't. One, it's snowing, which was cool. That wasn't supposed to happen. That was just nature. That was the pattern doing it for the film crew. That was just like a happy surprise for them, and I think it really worked well with the scene. Two, a lot of singing as they're all walking up. I don't know if that's actually her voice per se, because that's actually a that singing, that style of singing is actually, I think, a Norse cattle call. It's one that only females can do. But it's apparently like one of the loudest sounds a human can actually generate on their own. So kind of interesting to see that for the Aes Sedai bearing one of their own, having someone sing something that only women can do. I can't remember the name of that particular technique, but it is what it is. Another thing that I did learn based off of the additional content they have in their X-ray panel, when I was looking at making the music or the music of the Wheel of Time, one of them was talking about that all the songs were in the Old Tongue. You know, obviously not the one that, not Weep for Manetheren or The Man Who Can't Forget the Tom Maryland song, but the songs that you're hearing in the background when you hear vocalization, it's actually in the Old Tongue, which is really neat and makes me very happy that we're probably going to get a fully expanded Old Tongue later on. Again, like I covered in the last one, they've buried both enemies as well as allies. You actually see Lan burying the King of Gildan right there. You can tell by the symbol on his chest and the crown that he puts on there. They're not overly deep graves, which I know some people are like, why are they so shallow? It looks like they're melding together a lot of different burial rites with this. As a matter of fact, Moraine even says, last embrace of the mother, welcome home, which is a very Shienaran thing, but Shienarans don't bury their people clothed and they don't use shrouds. So it was like a little bit of all these different types of things. I thought it was appropriate because you're not going to dig super deep graves when you're trying to get somewhere quickly. They have a mission to do. They got to get Loial up to the tower. So maybe that had to do with it. Maybe it's something else where they kind of leave it to the elements and let the nature take back over. Nonetheless, it was a very beautiful scene. And another thing I want to point out is, if you notice Steppin, he's the one who carries up Carini. He puts her in her grave, and he takes off the ring. He takes off her ring. And when he grabs the ring, he does something in his hand. And then when he puts it over his head, you notice the stone's no longer there. So this is when he takes the stone out of the ring. I'm not entirely sure what the process is with that, why the warder does that. I know when they put it in the molten gold in the White Tower, it makes sense that it wouldn't be there. But I found it interesting that he does it right away. Two other things I want to say about this scene, then we'll move on. One, you get a nice Nyneave grabbing her braid, which I thought was very good and book accurate and the kind of thing she would do here. And two, Liandrin is shedding tears over this. So she isn't indifferent to her sister Aes Sedai. This clearly bothers her, and I thought it was good to show that little bit of, feeling coming out of her. She's not just completely cold and on her own. She does care about her sisters. All right, a couple other things I want to point out as they are getting to Tar Valon is, one, they're walking in Aja order. The Aja that has the most people left. I hate to kind of say it that way, but they're walking all the reds together, then the greens, then the one blue in her war in the very back. Nynaeve's kind of in the middle, back towards the greens. So I thought that was interesting. Loial, obviously not in a cage anymore because he burnt that cage. So they actually have him bound neck to hands with a chain, and then on the neck he also has a rope leading off that someone's leading him. He doesn't look like he's putting up much of a fight anyways. He's pretty defeated. Then you have Rand and Mat also getting there, although it looks like from a different route. But if you notice, each one of these groups have this little stone kind of showing, some script, which I actually, now looking at it, and I'll bring it up later too, looks like it's just the way this world writes. They don't write with Roman letters. They write in their own type of script. But that being said, they're all passing this one thing, showing all roads kind of really do lead to Tar Valon, which I thought was kind of funny the way that turned out. Nonetheless, one of the big things with this, as I start to say what's book accurate and what's not, is you have to realize that the things that take place in Caemlyn, they are doing in Tar Valon. Camelin is not seen. It's mentioned later in the series, but we haven't seen it, so obviously they skipped it completely, which many of us who've been paying attention thought they would. So all the things that would be taking place there seem to be taking place in Tar Valon. Keep that in mind. Up and to include the way that Mat and Rand are walking up there. They're in a caravan of people. There's some carts, there's some that are not, and they're just kind of like walking along as part of that procession into Tar Valon, which again, they're getting ready to parade the false dragon through. So it really does tie up perfectly to what Camelin was as far as the story. So you have that part where Mat gets bumped into by a little kid and he says, "Watch it, you little shh," and he stops from saying it. Not that he wouldn't say it, just, he realized it was a kid and he's like, I messed up. Has that little line with, Rand, "Stop acting like you're my wet nurse." Then they get into Tar Valon. Now the key with this, I think, there's a few things that I want to bring up. Actually, before they get to Tar Valon, Rand has that look, which never happens in the books. Says, "I recognize that mountain. I feel like I know that mountain. I feel like I've seen it before." Kind of foreshadowing to those of us book readers, like that's Dragon Mount. In the books, anyways, that's Rand was born on the slopes of Dragon Mount. So, kind of a nice little nod there to that, but kind of heavy-handed as well. Especially considering the fact that they're doing this whole misdirection, trying to show that hey, any one of these four could be the Dragon Reborn. So Rand and Mat eventually walk into Tar Valon, and you can just look from the way that Rand is looking around. It is very much that Camelin feel. Like he's like, "Oh man, look at this city." And it was. It's a spectacular looking city, both from afar and up close. They've done a wonderful job with this. So he's like, "Hey, Tom told me that his friend was in here. We're going to go there." Very Camelin. Maybe this is going to be Basil Gill. We didn't meet him in the episode, but it doesn't mean we won't later on. That being said, they're walking there, and as he's saying, "Hey, I thought we were going to Tar Valon," he's saying, "We will, but we're going to need to wash up first. You think they're going to let us go there like this?" And he walks off. You get to see that man. Patton Fane, just chilling there in the doorway. Then he walks off and laughs. So, as we thought, he is around. He is clearly following someone. At this point, it could be Mat, Rand, or Nyneave. Could be any of them. Nonetheless, they get to the rooms. He drops Mat off, and Mat's like, "Tell me I didn't do it. Tell me about the thing about the farm again." He's like, "You didn't kill her. It was the Fade." I'm with Rand here. I know some people. I've seen some people. It's like, "Oh, we know better." I'm like, "What do you mean you know better?" They've changed a lot for this. I don't remember Mat killing a little girl in the books. I know there were some issues with some dark friends, but never a little girl. And on top of that, it would be a big continuity error on the production crew, because his dagger was completely clean when he's pointing it up at the Fade, who's up there. Now, does that mean he couldn't have killed her earlier and wiped it off? Yeah, I guess not, but I don't think that he killed her. So, nonetheless, we get that scene, and then you have Rand up in the library, and we get to meet Loial. Now, I was kind of hard on Loial's look earlier, and I'll get to that in a minute. But let's just talk about a couple things here. The Corinthian cycle, which is what he's looking at. Rand is when Loial hears him say it, because he says the Corinthian cycle. Look at that book. It has that same writing that we're seeing outside that we've seen on other obelisks. So that tells me that this is just basically their common script. Nonetheless, Loial pops up and is like, "Oh, I didn't even hear you come in." And there's that whole interaction. And I really do like the way that Loial is being portrayed here, the way this guy is, the way he's acting Loial out. It is very, very book accurate. And I like that. I really, really appreciate that. He even sounds kind of like Michael Kramer. Very same, definitely the same deep tones, which you would expect from a big Ogier, but some of the same cadence to his voice as well, which I thought was a really nice touch. And that's just, it's wonderful acting on that point. He did nothing in his acting part that I thought was bad when it came to this. So let's go ahead and let's dig into our Ogier's look. All right, so going off things from the book, how Loial's supposed to look. Short beard. As someone who's had a long beard before, that is a short beard. So, check mark. Approve on that one. Let's see. Too wide nose. Yeah, check. If you look at the bridge of his nose and everything, it is quite wide. And I think they even widened the nostrils out a little bit. So yes, too wide nose, check. Too wide mouth. Mouth that splits the face basically in half. No, he doesn't have that. That's okay. That one, of all the things, that's like my least concern. I don't want him to look like Terrence and Phillip with floppy heads. So long, bushy eyebrows with a little bit of, yeah, he's got that 100%. Tufted ears. Can't really tell. It doesn't look like it from the couple scenes that I've seen, but, maybe he does. Then the hands, big hands that are going to make things look super small in them. Yes, he has them. And actually, that's one of my favorite parts about this as far as the practical look. Oh my God, they did such a good job on those hands. It is very, very hard to make a prosthetic hand look that good. They knocked it out of the park on that one. Now onto the thing that most people are having an issue with, and that's his hair. Most people are having, that I've seen, have had an issue with the hair, and even I did initially. Still, it's not my favorite, but then I started thinking, I was like, okay, how would he look if he had straight hair? If he had no hair? If he had hedgehog hair? And I'm like, they would all look a little funky. I think they chose to have this particular hairstyle for a very specific reason. Height. The illusion of height. That adds an extra 5 inches onto his height. As does, if you didn't notice it, the slight platforms that are on his boots. They try to just make the boots look big, tall, and blocky, as if his feet are just big, tall, and blocky, which, hey, maybe they will. Maybe later on they'll have a prosthetic foot and you'll get to see him barefoot. But those are definitely platforms on there. All of this is to make this Ogier bigger than he actually is, and to kind of trick the eye a little bit without having to do the forced perspective thing that was really well done in something like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings when it came to the dwarfs versus everybody else and the hobbits. But to not have to do that every time the Ogier is around is very important, because it cuts down on time, cost, all those things. So being able to use practical things to trick the eye or to give the illusion of additional height isn't necessarily a bad thing. So overall, the whole point with this is I had a problem with the look because it didn't match my headcanon, which is fine. Now, I'm actually fine with the look. Is it my favorite? No. Is it the worst? No. I think it's fine. I would even go as far as say it is a good look for an Ogier. There you go. Blast me in the comments. I actually kind of like the way Loial looks now. And actually in that scene with Loial, there's some neat stuff that I don't know if people realize. It looks like his coat is definitely big enough to put books in, although he didn't put them in there, and he did have a backpack on the ground, so maybe he's using that. But it was good to see him reach for the books first when he was talking about, hey, let me grab my things, and just immediately reach for them. Nonetheless, Rand beats feet and goes out to find Mat so that they can look at the false dragon. While we're out there, I want to point out a couple other things that we're seeing. One, that's where we get our first look of a novice. Two, you see a lot of Tower Guard out there, or maybe it's just Tar Valon Guard. If you don't believe me, this is the one that you see as soon as, Mat and Rand enter Tar Valon, and you see those same spears popping up throughout this whole procession, especially as the procession gets close. So these are White Tower Guards that are out there walking around and about. Nonetheless, Rand sees Mat, goes up on the balcony with him, and the procession starts to bring Logain. Now, Logain's back in the cage. Or should I say he's in a new cage. This cage does look a little bit better than the other one. It is definitely a new cage. It looks like it actually has some of the gold left in some of those etched parts. So it's not a continuity error. They probably arrived. Moiraine and them went in first, got the cage, let them know, hey, we got the false dragon, got the cage, and then are parading him through the streets on their way to the White Tower. So as that is coming up, you do see people throwing all kinds of stuff. And I will say you see a lot of radishes. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of radishes right there around the cage. I could not find a single frame that has Liandrin getting hit by a radish. Oh, if they had that in there, it would have been so good. But I didn't actually see one. So that's obviously something that happened off screen. Nonetheless, they start bringing Logain down. He looks up and he sees Mat and Rand. And there's part of me that thinks this is just Mat's corruption from, the dagger that is playing tricks on his mind. But the other part of me is like, well, Logain can see Ta'Veren in the book, so why wouldn't he be able to now? So it could be either or, it could be both. Maybe it wasn't quite as outlandish a performance as we see. Maybe that's what Mat's sickness is doing to him. But definitely there was something there. So one thing I want to mention on the whole conversation between Mat and Rand, when Mat's like, hey, if I don't want this channel, don't let us become that. Promise me. He's like, I promise. And Rand goes, you do the same for me too, right? And this hit me this last time I was looking at it. Mat just doesn't say, yeah, whatever, or oh, sure. He goes, you bet. You bet. So think about that, you bet. It's such a great little line to throw in there for him being the gambler and all those things. So the whole scene and a lot of the storyline with Steppin obviously is not in the books. It's not really at all in the books. But it is good character development. I think we've seen that Steppin and Lan are fairly close. I mean, when he first arrived at the camp, when Karini was off healing Moraine, he was immediately training alongside of Steppin. So they're alluding to they've had history. They've known each other for a while. So even if Karini and Moraine, don't talk and are very close, it seems like Steppin and Lan are a little bit closer. And you see some more of that building as they're going through. I mean, he's even the one that was telling the story about Lan when Nyneave was around the campfire in the last episode. So they have a history. They know each other pretty well. Nonetheless, you get to see Steppin get put in white by his, brother warders, and they're starting to walk down that hall that has those 4 statues of the warders again. And then you also see other people there. Now, initially I was like, oh, this is other warders. Then I looked at them. They're pretty young. It looked more like it was warders in training. So that's just kind of one of my little theories there, that those are actually warders in training, not actual warders that are standing there as they're proceeding out to allow Steppin to return his Aes Sedai, Karini Sedai's ring back to this molten gold flow that is around this eternal flame, if you will. This eternal flame outside. This flame of Tar Valon, if you will. Yes, I know that's not what the actual flame of Tar Valon stands for, but it's a good image there, and I think that might be why they did it right there outside, showing that this is a beacon of the light that is on even during the day, all those things. Nonetheless, it was actually a really beautiful scene, and I really liked it. All right, now I know that people are probably like, hey, why didn't you talk about Perrin and Egwene yet? It's because there wasn't a lot that happened in their capture that was very, very book accurate or anything of that nature. That's why I didn't bring it up then. However, the interactions later with Aemon Valda are huge. And I want to get into that now. So first of all, we see Aemon Valda walk up with no sleeves. He has taken whatever undercoat he had off. I think that is immediately to show that he's about to go and he's about to get his hands dirty, but he doesn't want to get his sleeves dirty. So I think that's the implication of why he's there without the sleeves on. So we see the white cloaks washing Egwene. They're using boar bristle brushes. They're cleaning under her nails. They're combing her hair. They're doing all this stuff to clean her. But that's not the only thing they're doing. What they're doing is they're not allowing her to wash herself. They are cleaning her the same way you would clean a pet or an animal that got dirty. They are dehumanizing her. And I say that specifically not just because, that's what they're doing in the series, but that leads up to one of the things I think they've done well. And that is this interrogation sequence. They employed a lot of actual interrogation tactics in this. The first of them being dehumanize your captive. Make them feel like they are, in fact, less than you. And above and beyond all that, it's so that the people around them that are doing kind of the bad things don't see them as humans. So I thought that was really good that that's the first thing they did. So one of the things with this is that they put Egwene in white, which I thought was an interesting choice because they don't do this to Perrin. They didn't do that to the Yellow Sister. They're marked out for death already, I think. This portion, her being clean and put in white, this is the true interrogation. That's why Aemon Valda is sitting there eating, which is an interrogation tactic. Look at me, I'm just going to enjoy my meal. We're just having a conversation. Be at ease. Maybe I'll give you some if you give me some information. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, which I thought was very, very well done. Additionally, his whole interaction with her, saying, oh no, I thought you were an Aes Sedai first, showing humility that he might not know everything, right? But then saying, but I know you can channel. You can channel. No, I can't. Oh, well, that proves it. Now I know for a fact you're not an Aes Sedai because Aes Sedai cannot lie. Does he know that she can channel? No, he doesn't. But he's acting as if he does because it's putting her off guard and she doesn't understand what's going on. How would this guy know that she can channel, all this other stuff? So that's a very common tactic as well. The other thing that he starts saying is like, can you believe those witches actually told me they don't need their hands to channel? That all the throwing motions and words and gestures are just kind of a crutch? That's actually totally in the books, 100% in the books, that basically that statement saying, hey, why are you waving your arms around like that when you throw a fireball? Just throw a fireball like we, the wise ones, do. They don't have to throw it, they just do it. So that is definitely in the books. The way that you learn how to channel is the way that you will channel. So Aes Sedai have been teaching their people with all these extra things like throwing a fireball or having to hold your hands like this when you go to shield somebody. That stuff isn't necessary, but they don't know that because that's how they were taught to do it. So it does show there's a little bit of fallibility within these Aes Sedai and the White Tower, something we definitely know comes up later on in the books. So Aemon Valda knows she's not an Aes Sedai after she says she can't channel, because he's like, Aes Sedai most certainly cannot lie, as much as they can twist the truth. So in this whole scene where Aemon Valda is interrogating Egwene, she actually fails. She actually does some things wrong in this. And the way that he's asking questions, he's trying to see now, okay, can she channel or not? And also, how do they feel about the Children of the Light? He brings it up a few times. You know, why don't I just cut you right here? Because you're a white cloak, and, you know, the light would, you know, one who walks under the light would never kill an innocent girl for doing nothing. He says, how do you know I'm not someone who lives my oaths? Why do you not know that I'll not just slit your throat, let you bleed out right here? And instead of going, because you're a white cloak, and you know, or anything of that nature, she goes, go ahead, do it. In the next life, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do tenfold to you, basically. I'm going to cut you down the middle like the pig you are. That told him everything he needed to know in his zealot eyes. You are clearly acting this way to the Child of Light. At best, you're a dark friend. At worst, you're a channeler. You know, these are the Inquisitors of the Children of Light, so it makes sense for it to be that straightforward, but keep that in mind as we're going forward through this scene. Then you have that little scene with Nyneave and Liandrin, and Nynaeve's like, yeah, and Reds never have warders. And Liandrin's like, no, never. Just real quick, flat out, no, never. She's like, yeah, Reds hate men. She doesn't say yes or no to that. She says, is that a question or a statement? Some of my sisters, perhaps. You know, but she doesn't necessarily say, this is that portion. When you see one of these Aes Sedai stop and think about something and then say something or misdirect or repeat your question back to you, they're buying time and they're getting ready to say something and get around their 3 O's. That is something I've noticed a couple times in the series that we all need to be paying attention to. She might, and then she tells a story that really leads to, she might actually just hate men. Like, that might be Liandrin. Then you had that little scene with the persimmon comment, and was like, oh, even the way her facial expression and everything made me cringe. I mean, she is doing such a good job at making you hate Liandrin. Like, everything about it makes you just hate that woman, which I think is good, because I think they're doing something with her that is a little more than what they do in the books. By the way, the one thing that does tell us is that if the persimmons are in season, it's somewhere between October and January-ish time frame, somewhere in that 4-month span, depending on the type of persimmon they're talking about. So now we kind of know where it was. It's not necessarily deep winter, but it might be just before winter. And then you got your boy, the MVP, Loial, for the win, finding Nyneave and being like, hey, look, I found her just based off of the braid, because it's very... And as he's talking, Rand and Nyneave talk. She goes down to look at Mat. You know, there's that scene. It's pretty much very close to the book, except in the books, it was in, again, Camelin, and everybody was there. So there's definitely a departure when it comes to that. But other than that, you know, it was fairly the same. Now, she does go back out there and talk to Rand. And this is when you get the story of, you know, her watching over Egwene when Egwene was 10 and had breakbone fever. That whole part is in the books, although in the book she is telling that to Moiraine as Moraine's trying to convince her that, hey, you can channel, you've done it before. I think she has done it before. I think that still, even though they didn't implicitly say it, and Moiraine thinks that that was her, you know, last episode was her first time touching true power, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think, like I said in my first episode, when I think she healed the arm a little bit, Egwene's arm, when it had that gash on it, and I think that when Egwene was 10 was probably actually Nynaeve's first time touching the one power. She just didn't realize it back then. The key to that discussion was that she says Egwene is unbreakable, which is going to come into play in the next scene as you get to see Egwene and Perrin back in the White Cloaks, or still with the White Cloaks. So let's go ahead and jump into that scene. So obviously the White Cloaks and Egwene and Perrin are different than the books, but there's still some good stuff here and still some good stuff that alludes to the books. First of all, I want to talk about that little, you know, Egwene channeling. When she finally does decide to channel, it happens fairly quick. She does a decent job of it, and she doesn't have to throw. She just kind of motions her hand a little bit, and it goes, which is good. Now, doesn't even look like it hits Aemon Valda, which we'll get into later in like a Wild Theory episode. But then right after that, she's using her other hand and she's channeling away from her. She's channeling Perrin's bonds to catch on fire so he can break out, which I thought was really good. Now, I don't think that she is holding two weaves at the same time here. Not at the exact same time. She's already thrown the little fire golf ball, if you will, before she starts channeling the other one. But I think it was part of a plan. I think she meant to distract a little bit, and so that she could do the other one. Because you got to remember, Aemon Valda can't see weaves. I know that we can, but he can't. So I think that was the case there. On the escape, I think we actually get to see Hopper right here. He's the one who saves them. So good on him for that. Back to the White Tower, you get to see Moiraine and Liandrin have their little thing. And as they're walking down the steps, you see 3 novices walk past them. I'm assuming they're novices because they don't have any color banding, but maybe they're accepted too. But they don't do any curtsies or anything. They just walk right past. You know, they kind of glance over at Moiraine real quick, but that's about it. Not a lot to say that I haven't already covered about that conversation between those two. It's pretty, you know, none of it's in the book, but it's pretty decent little thing, other than the fact they threw out that, hey, yellows are healers. Ooh, ah. More importantly is the next scene, which has Steppin, you know, with a smudge stick around some Forsaken idols. Now, as far as I can tell, there are 8 idols. 4 women, 4 men. If you haven't already watched my theory video, I already have a theory that they're combining some of these Forsaken to cut down on the number. I think they're doing that because it makes more sense for the series, for the television series. And, you know, some of those Forsaken didn't do much. They had like a one-time thing here and there. But here's what I want you to notice for this one. In this one, he's talking about Ishamael. They're focusing in on Ishi. And if you notice, what does he look like? All the other ones look like people, but he looks like a person, but he has flames coming out of his eyes and his mouth. So this tells me that, yes, they are keeping the fact that the person showing up in the dreams is Ishamael. To me, that's confirmed. That's really all I'm going to say about this particular one, because I'm going to save the rest of that for my Easter egg video and maybe some of my theory video. That might be my short video later on when I go over and start theorizing some more based off of this scene. But that's what I'm going to leave it at here. You get to see Alanna in Moraine's room, and this has some interesting stuff in it. So first of all, I can't really tell if it's a persimmon or if it's an apple necessarily that Alanna is eating. There are times that I'm like, that looks like a persimmon. There are times that it kind of looks like an apple. So let me know in the comments, apple or persimmon, which one is Alanna eating here? Nonetheless, during this conversation, there's a couple interesting things that come up and a little bit of foreshadowing, i.e. Moiraine says, you know, I've read somewhere that there's a way to release the water of their bond. And Alanna goes, oh no, sister, don't go doing that. So that was very interesting because Alanna is the water that she passes the bond to in the books. So that was just kind of an interesting thing to me that they're already kind of setting that up this early in the series. The only other thing in this scene that I think is particularly of note to us book readers is that wall hanging that Moiraine goes over to and opens up. It's clearly not just a wall hanging. I think that this is some kind of a device that she and Siuan Sanche use to communicate things. Maybe it's, I'm not there, I'll talk to you later, or if, you know, or what, but I think that what image shows up there is very much a message to the other person. Right now, it has the image is a, what looks like a blue sister, potentially in the tower somewhere, with her back to the viewer, looking into the distance through some arch doorways. So that was kind of a neat aesthetic there. I think that we're going to see more come into that, and I want to do a little more research before I make any theories about that. But let's move on to the next portion, which is where you have that scene where Lan is talking with Steppin in Steppin's room. So one of the things that I found hilarious in this is Steppin going, you know, I've never been with a man before. I mean, but hey, you know, maybe. And Lan just in his stoic, 2 men. And I like the fact that they're not shying away from that kind of interaction. I think it's funny. I think it's hilarious. And, you know, looking back at the books, they were really open. I mean, they're talking about pillow friends. There was talk about men that weren't really into women. So these are just a part of the world in the books and in the series. One of the things I wanted to note that I think is a little Easter egg or a little thing that's a nod to the books is in Steppin's room. Now, we saw Steppin, he has his 2 little hand axes that he fights with. They have double blades. However, in his room, you see swords, you see daggers, you see quivers full of arrows. So it shows that warders, even though they have their one preferred weapon that maybe they're the best with, they're trained probably in all of these weapons and know how to use them all, which is wonderful and just so perfect for what they actually are. The other thing about this scene is it shows that Steppin and Lan, they have a bond, and they're continuing that bond, and Lan's opening up to him more and more each time they talk. But they have that connection already. And above and beyond all that, Steppin's the first one that goes, hey, you know, Nynaeve's falling for you. You know, he's the first one to really notice, which I thought was great. And even as they're doing that, you know, Lan gives that typical Lan answer, well, that's too bad for her. So we cut away from there, and there's another scene where you think maybe you might see Padden Fane. There was another one where we saw him. You'll see in my Easter egg video. But when the sun's coming up, I looked at that frame by frame as it's raising through the city to see if I could see Padden Fane, Myrddraal, Trollocs. I didn't see any. But if you guys did, hey, let me know. I'd love to know if I missed something in that particular scene. But it was very pretty to see the sun rising and how it's coming through the city streets before you return to Steppin's room, which is where we see Lan wake up and realize, oh crap, something's not right. He sees the packet of the empty tea. He notices one of the daggers is gone and starts bolting up the steps. And he finds his friend slumped in front of that same statue that Nyneave stopped in front of after he had visited her room. So there was a little bit of foreshadowing. We know that Nyneave is very worried about Steppin. After he leaves, she eventually kind of leaves the room too, in the same statue that she stopped in front of and looked up before Liandrin came up and interrupted her, is the exact statue that Steppin completed suicide in front of. Kind of a heart-wrenching scene. So we're going to skip past it and go straight to the funeral for Steppin and some observations there as well. First of all, there's no high-pitched singing. This is a dude throat singing, which is something that only men can do. So you had the Aes Sedai funeral with a singing form that only women can do. Now you have the warder with a singing form that only men can do. Very nice choices on their part there. Additionally, notice that everyone just has this covering, a covered and overshirt that is white, except for Lan. He is decked out in the same garb that he has, which I found out from watching, again, that X-ray content, that he had a little bit of input in his character design, costume design, and he threw in some Korean elements because he has Korean descent, which I thought was so phenomenal. And it actually works for Lan anyways. And it helps take Daniel Henney, who's not a small dude, but makes his shoulders look just even broader. So great choice there. Nonetheless, he's the only one that is actually decked out completely in white because he's the designated mourner. So that's why another one of the warriors looks at Lan and says, put your hand on him, relieve us of our grief. Now, I know a lot of people are like, why would they choose Lan? Well, here's the reasons. I'm going to give you a few. Number one, they were close. I know it's not in the books, but it looks like they've in the series, like they were actually closer than he was to, Maxim and Yvonne. So just keep that in mind. They're close. Two, he was kind of on watch. He was the one who was supposed to stay with him over the night, make sure nothing happened. And three, he's the one that found him. So there are three reasons right there why he would be the one they would choose. And four, most importantly, he's one of the main characters. So you get to see him and how that water bond works between him and Moiraine, and she feels his pain. And they kind of have that feedback loop of grief. And I think that feedback loop of grief, where Lan is feeling it, and Moraine's feeling it and not trying to hold it back, is what leads to that emotional response from Lan that we never get in the books, really, but we definitely got to see here, and I thought it was done well. So overall, there's what I found with the kind of spoiler-esque type of things. We're going to get into a little bit more, especially when it comes to Forsaken, in my Easter egg videos. I think I've pegged down a few of them on exactly who those statues were. I will give you a hint right now. Asmodean almost certainly is going to be in this series, because one of those statues is holding a guitar. So there's your little kind of sneak peek into the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about in my Easter egg video later this week. Nonetheless, thank you very much for watching the video. I'm glad you stayed to the end. Don't forget to click that like, subscribe, and bell icon so you're notified whenever I come out with new content. And until I see you next time, have a wonderful day.